Well, welcome everybody. I have with me here today Aleš, and before introductions, I thought we could all start with a centering exercise. So what I'd like to do is to invite you to soften your eyes or close your eyes and take just a few breaths and start to notice the internal space with your breath and where it goes. Maybe where it's not going today. And then also start to notice stretching your awareness out. Notice the air and the space outside of your body. And how far does your awareness go? And what are you noticing? And then once again, bring your awareness back into yourself. Now seeing what's changed and where the breath is and how it feels in your body. Thanking and honoring who you are today, who you are in this moment. Feeling that life force of your breath. And then as you feel ready, you can gently open your eyes, letting yourself keep some of that internal space while you reach outward into the interview today. So welcome, Aleš. Just to share with those who might not know you a little bit about you, you've lived all over. You've lived in the Czech Republic where you were born, Germany, Great Britain, Switzerland, Santa Cruz. Maybe there's another one I don't know about. You've been teaching. You've been trained by Peter Melchior and Emmett Hutchins, sorry. Two of Ida Rolf's original students. And I just would love to welcome you here today. You've had some exciting things coming out of the European Guild. The John Lodge book, so the basic series in all its abundance, and that award-winning documentary, Finding the Line, which I'll give some links to those for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's some beautiful gems that you've helped add to our community. So thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Greer. It's a pleasure, and thank you for your kind words and introduction.
So I would just love to know a little bit about your journey into structural integration. And I've read a little bit. I know that you started out in mathematics, went to acting, and then your knee brought you to SI, but I wondered if you could fill in some gaps and tell us a little story of how you found Ralphie.
Okay. We're going back to 1983, 1984, roughly. And I was at the Acting Academy in Zurich. And my psychological state at the time was pretty bad. It would take too long to give you all the details, but I was really seriously depressed. Family situation was not, it was complicated, but anyway, it's not important. But it was that bad that I was considering basically ending my life. Okay? But I was at this acting academy, and it was about 6 months before the final exams, and I was a partner in many scenes for my colleagues, you know, for the final exams. So I thought to myself, well, I can't let them down. I mean, what are they going to do? They can't play the scene without me. So I'm going to wait until the final exam and then shoot myself afterwards. But fortunately, at the time, my knee hurt. There had been a meniscus surgery some years earlier, and the lateral meniscus of my right knee had been completely extracted. So there was no meniscus there anymore. And years later, it still hurt. And it hurt to the point where even on stage, it was just uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. So somebody suggested I go see a Rolfer. And well, I did. And he took me through a basic series of structural integration. And the knee was kind of a sideshow. The knee didn't hurt after 3 sessions anymore at all. But what happened also during that whole process is that I started feeling, actually very quickly, even in my first session, that a good part of my psychological confusion was stuck in my body. And suddenly I saw a way of working on this by working on my body and not talking about the problem. And it was like after these 10 sessions, not all the problems were gone, but it was like I was seeing light at the end of the tunnel. You know, very, very faintly, but it was there. So I thought, well, I mean, 10 sessions, 10 hours of work, what is that? That's nothing. You know, it's nothing. If you can extrapolate that and say, if you go in the same direction for another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, hey, what can you gain then? I mean, then I don't have to shoot myself. You know, I have a path where I can follow and work on myself bit by bit. And so I started practicing Zen meditation. I started practicing yoga, and finished acting school. And I was on stage for several years in Germany and Switzerland for 7 years. And then I got pulled back into this experience that I had, which had been very powerful and very strong. Maybe the strongest experience until that point in my life. And I was getting tired with the acting stuff a little bit. And so I decided, okay, this is it. I want to study this and learn how to do this. So that's my journey up to that point.
Oh, it's a beautiful journey, and it sounds like you've gotten a lot of resources for helping others from it.
Yes, because yes. I think sometimes if you have such a strong, let's say, difficult experience in your life, I think you have a better capability of empathizing with the situations of other people than if you've, you know, kind of had an easy life and it's been cool all along and nothing's really happened that was too dramatic. So I do think that helps. Yeah, definitely.
And what was it like for you jumping into the training?
Well, it was, in some ways, it was, of course, a major shift. Suddenly I didn't have 200 people or 500 people as an audience in front of me, but I was alone with someone else in a room. So, I mean, that in itself is quite a change. But, you know, what helped in some ways, what helped is when I was an actor, I had to put myself into the situation of someone else. Not only mentally, but also physically. I would change my posture, my structure a little bit to fit in with the character I was playing. So, for instance, I don't know, one of my let's say roles that I was, let's say, well known for at the time was Puck, the little elf in Midsummer Night's Dream. And of course, that's a completely different physicality than if you play let's say a nobleman or some blue collar worker in some other play. You know, that's a different story. So I think I was able to go into the body of my models or of my clients later, and just feel through my body what they felt in their body, to a certain extent at least.
You're saying you were good at trying on their patterns.
Yeah, right. So my approach was never to try and figure out what is pulling which bone which way and why. I would just, you know, I would just more and more feel it and then know where to work.
Mm, beautiful.
So that's, but still, of course, I had to learn all the anatomy and all that, you know. So it was a big shift. It was definitely a big shift, but not that. It felt natural at the time. You know, it's not. It didn't feel like. Yeah, it just felt okay. Yeah, and Peter Melchior, and then Emmett Hutchins and Niels Silvera, David Davis. Those were my teachers, and they're good teachers, all of them. And I'm proud that all of them, actually, except for the ones that have passed away, but all of these old teachers of mine are now part of the organization that I'm honored to chair at the moment.
And do you have any standout aha moments or memories from your training?
From the training, oh, I have several. Well, we had someone in class who came from originally, who was a potter. You know, she would form clay. So she didn't come from the medical field or massage field at all, but she knew how to form things. And this is the way how she worked, you know. And she was my partner in class when we were practicing on each other. And I had this, because I had this also analytical background from my math a little bit. I was also interested in what we were, you know, the muscles and stuff. And she was working on my hip, and I kind of turned around to her and said, "Hey, Mary, what is that you're working on?" And she said, "I have no idea, but it's too short." So, and she was also the one, I mean, this was amazing. We had to still write the paper at the end of class, at the end of our training. And she made drawings, you know, drawings of structures in the body, of drawings of people working on each other, of different ways. It was beautiful, beautiful. So just someone who comes to the work from a completely unintellectual point of view, but just knows how to work with hands and fingers and has a feel for material. This is the wonderful thing about this work, that you can attract people from all walks of life, and they can enter this profession not having to renounce what they've already have, but actually that becomes an asset in their work, whatever that is.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely had I think musicians are an interesting person to get into the field. You can
Absolutely.
feel how their mind works differently. So how did you go from student to teacher? What
Um,
was your driving force?
First of all, I was very hesitant to teach. Really hesitant. I was asked many times to teach, but if you were trained by Peter and Emmett, then these shoes just seemed so big to fill, that I just there was such a reverence that I had for these teachers, that I just didn't dare to even think about it. Okay? But there was a moment. I got to know, a client came to me, okay, a woman, a lady, and she had been in a serious skiing accident and had really hurt her neck and had migraines and ongoing headaches all the time. And the medical prognosis was even more dire because several doctors had told her that any ever so slight wrong movement with the neck could end up her being in a wheelchair and paralyzed. And looking back, I'm kind of stunned at myself that I had no hesitation with doing a basic series with this person. You know, all alarm bells should have been ringing. Don't touch this, you know?
Yeah.
But they weren't. And I guess through my meditations over the years, I kind of learned to trust this gut feeling that it's going to be okay. That's how I like to think about it. I don't know. Anyway, we did the 10 series and we came to the 7th hour. Head, mouth, nose. And I put my finger in her nose and she let me in all the way up. And I took my nose slowly out again. And then there was this incredible sigh. And that moment, the whole system of her organism just shifted. Her husband was watching this, you know, he was in the room. And we all three at that moment knew that this was the key moment for her to get better. It was something you can't put into words really, because it's just something you feel in that moment. And her husband immediately said after the session, he said, I want to learn how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
He sold his company. He was a director of a fairly large company and offered to start the first basic training where I taught and where he would act as a, you know, you need people that organize things, you know, like it's hard to teach and organize everything yourself. So he had a secretary and, you know, he had people doing all the stuff around it. And that's how it started. And the lady now, Zdenka, she is our movement instructor. She, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's so beautiful. That makes
Yeah.
me so happy.
It is, and it's just a moment that moment was if it's not now, it's never going to happen. You know, it's just a moment where you have to grasp the opportunity or not. You can decide not to do it, but I did, and that's how the European Guild started. And after our first basic training, the other guild trained practitioners in Europe, some of them, you know, saw what we were doing and called up and can you not do this like a training where we are? And so it slowly grew, you know, around the originally GSI trained practitioners who are in Europe.
Yeah, one thing that I was really curious about, just because of the cultural diversity in Europe and the different learning styles, was I was wondering, was the series easy to teach to these different people from different backgrounds because it's universal, or did you have certain learning curves of how to make it approachable when you had several different cultures in the room?
I think what helps a lot is that we started teaching always in the local language. So when I teach in Prague, I teach in Czech. When Adam teaches in Poland, he teaches in Polish, and when Fulvio teaches in Italy, it's in Italian. That is so incredibly important. I mean, translation is one thing, but so much gets lost in translation. Is, you know, there's different metaphors, there's different idioms in the culture, there's different jokes. So I taught the first class in Poland in English, and Adam was translating for me. And every time he talked without translation, just explaining something in Polish, there was much more, you know, there was much more liveliness in the class immediately. And so I said, Adam, listen, next time you're going to teach this class. I'll come and watch and help you a little bit, but you're going to teach it. And that's how we kind of, you know, progress slowly into having other teachers. Okay, so I was more of a mentor then after that than I taught the class myself. But it is different. It's very different from country to country because the languages are so different. I mean, just imagine, let's say something drastic. I mean, just imagine Chinese. I mean, the brain is structured differently because of the different language than English or than you know, some Slavic language or something. They're really so different, and yeah, it's much better to teach in the local language. Ultimately, this becomes a little bit of a problem over time because when you get the people together then to teach like workshops and continue education, then you have to kind of get back to English and, you know, have this as a common language and have translations. But then they have a good basis in their own grounding in their own language and can switch to this translation stuff much easier. So yeah, good question, but I think it's important. I mean, language was important to Dr. Rolf. I mean, she you know, had all this about semantics and about Korzybski's work and the way she always tried to, even when I read her old text, to try and express herself as clearly as possible and not, you know, talk around things. But when she said something, there was a certain amount of precision. And you cannot, or it's very difficult to translate that precision. You have to have it in in the language that you teach.
Would you call yourself a historian when it comes to Ida Rolf?
Well, I don't. I think there are one or two other people who are even more historians than I am. I mean, there's Ben Hannawald in Idaho who's really gotten into this. I mean, if you ever want to know anything about history, ask him. But I have read most of the stuff that I can get my hands on from her because I think because of this primal experience I had with structural integration. I mean, what struck me immediately, remembering back now, is that the basic idea is so simple. I mean, this is really not complicated. If you come to think of it, that, you know, that we have a fascial web and we have bony elements in it, and between every bone and every other bone there is a joint, and there is at least hypothetically a good organization so that every joint can, you know, function at its best within the given parameters that that joint has. That is not so difficult, okay, to grasp as a concept. And it always fascinated me how she came up with this. So I read all as much as possible of the things that she published, and then we got this incredible gift. Just, well, basically when the pandemic started in 2020, a couple of days earlier, we received this large box of old material. You know, I have here in this very room, I have the handwritten original copy of Ida Rolf's book, you know, the entire book in her own handwriting, and diverse versions of it in typewritten and corrected and recorrected. And you could tell the incredible amount of work. I mean, nowadays we have computers, you know, I mean, we can just type things and erase things and paste and copy. This was such a major project. You know, she had a family to raise, she had things to teach, she was 5 years she wrote this book, you know, before it was published. John Lodge had to do all these drawings by hand. This was not like on a computer, you do a little bit of this. This was really all handwork. And when you see this, there is a reverence that you get for that person, you know, for the incredible amount of investigation that she put into this. And she was like that nearly from the beginning of her life. I mean, think back. She was in 1926. She traveled to Europe to study in Zurich, where I live right now, or near Zurich. She went there to study for a year nuclear physics, okay, at the university. Now, when we say we go across the ocean nowadays, we fly a couple of hours, and it seems to us this is a kind of a major project. Hey, she was 3 weeks on a boat, you know, and she would study in Zurich nuclear physics from Monday to Friday. And on Friday evening, she would take a train to Geneva, which nowadays is a 3.5 hour trip with the trains nowadays. Okay. 1926, different story. She would travel to Geneva and on Saturday and Sunday study homeopathy in Geneva. You know, so there was somebody who was nuclear physics, homeopathy, who had this incredible like Renaissance personality, like Michelangelo or somebody like that. It was who tried to see the world in its many facets that it has and look at everything from all sorts of angles. So I think her role in all of this and in all the fascial research, I'm really shocked how little this is appreciated and how little she's mentioned in all of this, you know, and sometimes even forgotten. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, even just being a woman in the 1920s to get to where she was at, like the gumption you'd have to have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons that she was able to study at all was because there was a First World War and all the American soldiers were fighting in Europe. So in the United States, the women were, you know, basically engaged to study and to fill in those posts that the men couldn't fill in at the moment. And then, you know, to travel to Europe to study nuclear physics. I mean, this was, you know, nuclear physics in 1926, that was Einstein, that was Heisenberg, that was Schrödinger, and the only woman in that group was Marie Curie, you know. And so there was like 20 guys and one woman, and and Ida Rolf went there and wanted to know about how this works. This was where quantum physics was developed, where the new ideas came up, you know, for how the world works. And so, yeah. And it was not something that she did because she needed to do it for the Rockefeller Institute where she was working at the time. She was a chemist, you know, so this was not part of her field of work expertise at all. You know, she was interested in it because she wanted to know how the world works. Okay. And then she boiled it down to how a human being works within the larger energy field of the earth. That was afterwards her discovery and her line of inquiry that she had for the rest of her life.
When you teach or when you're practicing, do you feel like you try to preserve or bring in the essence of the work? And do you feel like there's a separation between the essence of Ida and the essence of the work? Are they one and the same? Does that make sense?
I'll try and answer it in the way I understand it.
Okay.
Okay. I think what Ida Rolf started was an investigation into this relationship between a human being and the gravity field. Now, there's been many people have taken this exploration and gone off with it in different directions, which is absolutely fine because people are different and brains are different, as we already mentioned. So for some people, they have more of an interest in, let's say, a stringent anatomical logic or something like that. Whereas I think the Hellerwork people, where you come from, are more interested also in the psychological aspects of the work. And what I've been interested in is just exploring the essence of what she had. Okay. And so in some ways, this is what I've been trying to preserve to a certain degree, because I think the other stuff is okay, but I would like there to be a reference point of the original that people can come back to and reference it to something, to that original idea. So I try to, in what I teach and how we teach, to stay as close as possible to what she taught, because I have practically never proven her wrong so far. I think she was pretty smart.
Yeah, I'm not gonna disagree with you there.
No, well, some people will criticize her for something, or say that she was wrong. I don't know. I don't think she was. My feeling is always that she's maybe been misunderstood in some instances. But if you read her very, very carefully, what she says, and follow let's say, the thoughts that she had, and not after every sentence say "but," but just go into her mindset and just go along with it for a moment, it becomes very interesting, and that's what I like to do.
Got me curious to read more.
Well, I mean, I think I think everyone should read her book. I mean, it's, everything is in there. She wrote it in a way that normal people who did not know anything about structural integration wouldn't understand it at all. It's like a code. It's the whole basic series in code. And once you've done the training and you know a little bit about basic series, you can read that book and you'll understand it to a good degree. For me, it's unusual, the thought that I would study something and not read the founder's main book. I mean, just imagine you go and study Jungian analysis and never read anything by Carl Gustav Jung. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I would encourage any practitioner to, even if they disagree with it, there's a discussion that you start with what she says, and it'll get you somewhere, even, when I was in workshops, there were some workshops that I liked and some workshops that I didn't like. But even the ones I didn't like were interesting because I had to find out why I didn't like them, why I didn't like how this person worked. So there was always a discussion in me going on, which brought me further. So I don't mind reading books which I disagree with. So it gives you a different perspective and it challenges your mind to,
Yeah. It's like the Thomas Edison. He's like, I don't know if I can tell you how to turn on a light, but I can tell you 100 ways to not turn on the light.
Right, right.
So I'm curious about your practice, and maybe you spoke about acting, but do you feel like there are other paradigms or essences that you bring in to what makes your work unique? Like, how would you describe your individual work to someone?
As opposed to other people's work, or as to someone who's a complete layperson?
Yes, I'd love to know both. If you're open to sharing.
Okay, I'll give you my 2-minute elevator speech.
Okay, I love it.
Okay, this is how I usually start with a new client. I ask them, whether they know anything about it, and usually they know a little bit or heard something, and so I try to explain the basic idea. Okay, the basic idea is that we have within us, on the deepest level, we have bones, and around the bones there is a web of soft tissue which is continuous. So when somebody dies, that web disintegrates fairly quickly. And like in one of these detective stories, when they found like a corpse in the woods somewhere that's been buried for some years, you'll find all individual bones scattered all over the place. Okay, so the foot is not a foot. The foot is 26 little bones which are held in a certain pattern by a webwork. The spine is not really a spine, but it's individual vertebrae which have soft tissue around it. Okay? Now, what can happen over time is that because of injuries, because of habits, because of the psychological problems, because of things that you, unawareness, is that that whole web work gets displaced relative to the bones and starts pulling joints into positions or the spine into positions which are not ideal. A simple example would be for somebody who plays professionally the violin. So they go several hours a day, they go like this, okay? And after a while, after some years, the pattern of the web looks like my shirt now in the upper body. And you can, when I would stand up, you would see how that travels through the entire body, how the pants on one side are higher than on the other, and that, like that, okay? Now, this person is, of course, not going to stand like this around at a party. This just looks weird, you know, when they have after the concert, when they drink their wine and stuff. So he's going to use muscles now to straighten himself out against gravity to present himself to the world. But underneath, there's always this feeling of I'm actually being pulled down and I have to fight this all the time. So in the simplest possible way, what I do in 10 sessions of structural integration, I straighten out the shirt so that the joints can come into a position which is more natural to them, and closer to where they're supposed to be. And this is what I literally do. This is where my acting stuff comes in a little bit. I really literally do this with my shirt and with my pants, and I pull them into place and stuff like that. And then I say, you know, we do that systematically in a process of 10 sessions. And what we can do now is a first session, and then you'll probably fairly quickly realize whether you like this or not, and whether we can work together. And then we can decide whether we'll do the rest or not.
Yeah, I'm asking everybody from now on what their elevator speech is. That was great.
Well, I have just found it's much more easier to show it than, you know, it's really, you know, this is one of the things that Leiderolf also said, you cannot talk about this work because the work is an experience. Once you've had the experience, the words will help you, remind you of that experience. But the words are not the same thing as the experience. You know, the experience is within your being, within your soul, within your physical body, and not within the verbal manifestation of that experience. So this is one of the reasons I think why structural integration has not, let's say, become mainstream. You know, where there's only a certain group of people, I don't know how many, 5,000 in the world, I don't know, something in that ballpark probably, because it requires the experience to understand it. You know, if you think about Chinese medicine, you can look at the meridians and you can get the concept of meridians, and there's an intellectual process. You can agree with it or not agree with it, but you can understand it. Structural integration, you cannot understand. You have to experience it, and that's it. Okay. It's also difficult to explain it to a medical professional. It's just that they will just, you know, yeah, okay, nod. And I have, every time a journalist comes to me and asks me about an interview, I tell him, we'll do 10 sessions of structural integration and you can write about your experience. I'm not going to talk about it. Okay? And some take me up on that and some don't. Because it's really, you know, they'll write something, but it's not the same thing. It's all theory. Structural integration is living practice. It's everyday life. It's how you behave in the world. Okay? How you encounter the world, how you encounter other people, how you relate to them. Okay? For me.
What would you say is your, I'm asking you to put words, but what would you say is your experience in the series as the practitioner? So not looking at it from the lens of the client, but what do you experience in yourself when you're giving the work?
First of all, what I try to do always, okay, no, let me rewind and start somewhere else. I think one major effect of this work comes from a communication of two nervous systems. So what you do with your hands, you transfer the experience that you have in your body, which is usually better organized than the client's, by that nervous system connection to the other person. So for me, the experience when I'm working is always this back and forth. I have to always find the other person. Either I verbally connect him to the place where we're working, or I ask for some little movement, but I'm always there with that person, and then I'm back with me. So it's like a wave, or like breathing, like goes back and forth. And I'm usually very centered afterwards, more centered than I was before a session. I'm usually, after a days of work, I'm not physically tired. I may be tired mentally because of the amount of concentration, you know, but my body isn't tired. I could go for a walk or something. It wouldn't be a problem. So it's this yeah, it's such a deep connection to the other person. I try to think that I'm not working on a person. I try to think I'm working in a person and with a person. Okay. I think this is really an important difference, how you look at the other person, that you're exploring the possibilities that the other person's body has together. And I'm not trying to change something, but I'm trying to, maybe it's like being a midwife, you know, it's all there. I just need to remove the stuff that's hindering it to emerge, and allow the other person to have the experience that something new can emerge. I don't have to put something into the system. It's there. It's all there. It's just not present. It's not aware. It's maybe covered by an injury or something.
So would you say,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No.
So would you say you're holding a container and inviting or allowing a flow?
Yeah, definitely. Also, yeah. I mean, of course, I think that's natural. After 30 years, you work differently than when you just get out of school. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. For me, structural integration learning is really similar to learning to play a musical instrument. You know, in the beginning, during the training, you do da 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 again and again and again. That's fine. And after a while, you start playing little tunes, and then it gets more complex, and then your hands and fingers they feel different things. So, for instance, recently or in the last years, I've been working a lot. I always used to work a lot with movement. You know, that's one of the paradigms Idorov had. Put it closer to where it belongs and get it to move in that position. Okay? Which still, I mean, good input. And I've started reducing it to the point where I just imagine yourself doing that movement. Or just imagine yourself walking on a beach. And my experience has been that this subtlety has even a much better effect than if the movement is actually done. So this is kind of my line of inquiry, where things get more subtle and get more maybe brain oriented, you know, like accessing through the imagination of things the central nervous system, and not necessarily only stretching fascial layers. but the fascial layers will stretch easier if the brain kind of is part of the process. So that's what I've been exploring the last years.
I love that. Thinking about just kind of from like a childlike standpoint, like your imagination might be the key to unlocking like a different perspective or a different feeling in the body.
And I think Feldenkrais practitioners, some of them will work in that direction, you know, where they will not do a movement, just say, you know, imagine moving your pinky or something, you know, and feeling what that does in the body. So it's a little bit in that direction, but I definitely reposition bones and fascial layers while I'm doing it. So it's not completely off the table.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Off the table. Sometimes you probably go off the table.
Right, but I do have my fingers, my knuckles on my elbow somewhere.
Yeah. So I also really wanted to hear more about the making of Finding the Line and what drew you to this, because I feel like, man, like our community has to be so grateful that you've produced such this beautiful video of the work. So what was that like?
Well, the original intent was this happened to me, but this happens, I think, through many students in their training, that they go through an incredible process, a process of maturation also in some ways, you know, even though they don't get, I mean, they don't get that much work, but it's the whole process of getting involved in Eiderolf's thinking and feeling their bodies from a different perspective, looking at themselves from a different perspective, that they go through these waves and come out like sometimes nearly a different person. So I thought this is well worth documenting once, you know. And so the original idea was that we just film, we picked out, I mean, our cameraman actually just came always to the first weekend and just himself picked out 2 or 3 people fairly randomly, actually. So it was just his intuition. That one is that one. And we interviewed them in different parts and stages of the training, you know, to see how they talk differently, how they express themselves differently, what they think about the work. And so we did that for over the entire training. The whole thing took a bit longer because of COVID, because it was a year longer in effect. And then we had this material, but material is not a movie, you know. It's just clips. So Grzegorz and I, we basically hunkered down for a week, working 12 hours a day in front of a screen, and started putting this movie together and creating a storyline around it, which would hold these elements together. And so one thing came to the next. There was a point where we thought, well, we'll have to actually, if somebody watches this who's not an SI practitioner, we have to at least give him an idea what the process is about. So, you know, then that part came in, and then we should let Ida Rolf talk herself, and you know, that you get this perspective of history also, that it's not that we're doing something which is kind of a new idea, but this is something which is 50 years old. And so the different parts came together, and ultimately it was a movie about how you first encounter structural integration and end up being a practitioner, and all the little stages in between. So that's in short what the movie is about.
And did it
but it's not scripted, you know. We didn't tell the practitioners what to say. It's really just, it's totally held up the microphone and asked 3 questions and let them talk. So
yeah. And you've got a training coming up March 1st, and it's an international training, and I'm unfamiliar because I'm a fairly new practitioner. Is this something new that you're doing it in 3 different
Well,
countries, or is that?
right. Our program is usually is a modular format where we have 20 extended weekends over 2 years, which makes it easier for people to be able to work, outside of that and to do this kind of as a ongoing process over 2 years. During the last years, we had several invitations to teach our program in the United States or in Canada, which is difficult because of the local legislations and stuff. It just gets very complicated. So there was a point where Neil C. Silvera had the idea, well, let's just do it in Europe and see if the Americans can come here. But then you have to do it in a format which you don't have to travel across the ocean like once a month. Right. So we had to put the whole package not into 20 weekends, but into 3 larger blocks. It's the same program essentially, but differently structured. And that's what starts on March 1st in Lisbon.
What do you see as the differences between the weekends and the modules? Do you find any differences?
I don't know yet because we haven't done the modular
Well,
now.
yeah, that's true.
But what I can tell you, the way I was taught was auditing practicing. I don't know how you do it in the Hellerwork community, but this was, we had 10 hours of auditing where we didn't touch anybody.
Mhm.
Okay, we were just watching, and this is a valuable experience. I wouldn't want to put that down at all. It's one way of really learning this. I have found that the modular format, which extends over 2 years, gives you something different and something which is at least as valuable, because people can, in between the modules, practice at home. Okay, so we do session 1, working on each other. They go home and get all their friends and do session 1. Okay. By the time I had finished my basic training in 1993, I had under my hands my partner in class and 3 models, exactly 4 people. And then I hung out my flag out of my house, structural integration.
Mm-hmm.
That's reality in that format. After the 2 years, if you do it in a kind of a longer modular format, they have had 50 people under their hands. So there is much more refinement in their touch and in their experience than in the other format. And we'll see how this is now with the 3 large blocks. I don't know. We'll see how this comes out. But there's also, there is the advantage that there is like a month in between. No, there's several months actually in between. One is in March, the other is in July, and the last one is in October. So you have time in between where they go home and can practice what they've learned on their friends and family. Okay? So I think this is going to work just as well.
I'll have to check back afterwards.
Sure.
I think it'd be fun to get together either graduates or people in different trainings or instructors. I'd love to just have a beautiful, hopefully loving conversation about some of the differences in the trainings, because I've noticed that we can get to know practitioners, but I don't know anybody that's gone through all of the different trainings.
Right.
That would be expensive, but I think that would be a fun thing to discover.
Well, I think I would actually like to go even further than that.
Yeah.
I would like to have an exchange of, that instructors from one school just sit in for a weekend or for a couple of days in a training of another school.
Yeah.
Just that people get to know each other. And it's not such a, and by the way, if any of you guys want to ever sit in on a weekend module here in Europe and on any of our basic trainings, you're welcome to do that. Just give us a heads up by email. and you're always invited. And this I'm extending this to any practitioner anywhere in the world. If they just want to come in and see what we teach, how we teach, no problem at all. There's no charge. Just come and watch. And
Oh,
be part of it.
beautiful.
Be part of that weekend module that we teach. Okay.
That's so beautiful. Okay.
Well, I think we need to be, no, but, you know, there's so few of us.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to,
But
what's the point of making this so we have our basic training and we're not going to have anybody interfere with this, you know? Hey, come on, be generous, open this up, you know?
let's get together.
Get to either Rolf used to, you know, or it was Moshe Feldenkrais who said that this this, let's say, that the emphasis in the body, it would be good that if the emphasis in the movement would be placed more on the extensors having a larger competence in the body. You know, that it's not just the flexors doing the fast work all the time, but this, you know, this isolation, this is a flexion, you know. Greed is a flexion. Hey, open this up, extend, come on. Everybody's going to gain from this. It's not like somebody's going to steal something that you're teaching. I mean, come on, with 5,000 people running around, you're not going to steal stuff. Let's share stuff.
Yeah.
You know? I'm really completely against any proprietary stuff there. I mean, just give it away, you know. My opinion.
I love it. And I'm always here for a body metaphor to explain something. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, I think this is a beautiful place to round this up. I've so appreciated getting to know you a little bit more and get to know a little bit about the EU Guild. And I really hope we can keep on communicating and getting together and sharing. Great. So thank you so much.
If you're ever in Europe, then don't hesitate to call or send me an email before and we'll get together in person, okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. Thank you for the talk, and well, I hope people will enjoy what we talked about.
Me too, I did.